Hi, everybody. I love being here. Love being in Berlin. It's actually the home of my grandfather. So I have a kind of growing connection. I've just applied for German citizenship. So I'm kind of feeling more and more a Berliner every day. So yesterday on the EasyJet flight over here, I looked at my talk title on the app. And it surprised me how much I'd promised in such a short period of time. I looked at the timing. I was like, okay, that's going to be interesting. So I'm going to give you like a whistle-stop tour of what I think are some of the most important tent poles about this conversation. Philosophical, business, politics. And then we're going to go into a panel where we're going to get a bit deeper on politics and purposeful democracy and citizenship. So that's hopefully a good segue in. I start every talk that I give reminding myself how much I love doing this work. On the way here, I walked past a club that looked like it was just getting into action on Saturday morning. And I remembered the fond moments of leaving a club at 10 in the morning. So I'm going to ask you to imagine right now you just left the best party of your life. You just connected with people. You've got the smiley face of the rave generation all over your body. And just bring that into this moment here. It's a way of opening us up to some gratitude, to some possibility. And so I'm going to give you some of the whistle-stop tours of this work. I'm going to introduce you to my new book, which is really a philosophy book. It's the first really philosophy book I've written. But first, I'm going to root it all in a little bit of my journey because it will make sense of where I get to next. So, I started my career as a militant, materialist atheist. And I thought, where better to pray to the God of atheism than in the science department of Cambridge University, which is where I went to study medicine. I wanted to be a psychiatrist, and I was given this wonderful opportunity to then, in the middle of the program, to do a year on the history and philosophy of science. And it blew my mind. I've never been more excited than anything in my life. So I decided, actually, I'm not going to go back to clinical school and complete the medical training. I'm going to live in the world of ideas, of philosophy, of thinking, of practical philosophy, what Aristotle called phronesis, the use of wisdom in everyday life. Through some strange shifts of purposeful fate, I ended up first working in advertising and consumer psychology, and then I set up my own company in 1999 in the dot-com 1.0. And I grew it from no people to about 50 people in 2 years with my business partner. And we were helping really the biggest companies in the world develop innovation strategies, new products, new business models, new services, new mobile phone ideas, new apps before even apps were a thing. And long story short, it all came grinding to a halt in what I could politely call an entrepreneurial burnout. A breakdown of my own emotional and psychological state, and also a breakdown of my business model in many ways too. And so, not wanting to miss out on a great crisis, I went deep and long, took some time off, exited my own business without any cash, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. And I went on a mission around the world. I studied very sincerely various different traditions, different practices. And I found myself one day on the Cook Islands. Anyone been to the Cook Islands? It's near New Zealand somewhere. It's a little, super little place. And I was waiting for a flight out to Auckland. And there was one cinema on the island, and I went to the cinema. There was one movie on. And again, as purposeful luck would have it, it was a movie that you may have seen called The Pianist. Anyone seen The Pianist? Okay, good proportion of the people. And something happened to me in that sweaty, salt-corroded cinema. And it was while watching a scene where a gentleman, an older gentleman, is walking through the streets of Warsaw in 1939. And a Nazi soldier forces him to walk in the gutter and clips off his hat. And this proud gentleman is forced to move into the gutter of the street. And there was way more impactful scenes in this movie. There's Auschwitz, there's, war and murder and mayhem. But this one moment hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was crying and crying and crying, thinking about my great-grandparents who died in Berlin and then, or in Warsaw, we don't know. And something about this moment, I felt this deep embodied existential affirmation. Whatever I do next for the rest of my life has to be about reducing this kind of suffering, this needless humiliation, inequality, hatred, pain, etc. And in the same moment, I also got a, yes, I'm alive. They didn't get me all, didn't get us all. I'm going to make something with my life. And that was really the beginning of really understanding the power of embodied purpose. Not the words are fun and interesting, but feeling in your body a sense of, I am here to serve something. That was almost 15 years ago, and I'm still experimenting with my purpose. So, no answers. There's just lots and lots of questions. Oh, I think we've lost some. As I've been what I would call unfolding my purpose. I think it's the only thing you can do with purpose. You can unfold it. It's like a flower, and more petals come out, and more things happen. And I now work in what you could loosely describe as the transformation industry. I believe my skills and strengths have brought me to not just cook, but cook people's psychospiritual growth in some way. And it's been challenging accepting that role. I didn't want to do this. I've been asked many times to be in the personal transformation movement. I was asked by anyone know the Landmark Forum? I was tapped on the shoulder of this big institution saying, you should be a leader of this program. I was like, no, there's nothing to do with my life. The idea of being a Tony Robbins type, American, everyone clap, it's all good, just has never worked for me. Neither is the idea of serving the middle class and their wounding. Doesn't work for me, never worked for me. So it's been a long journey to actually accept the channel that I have, the purpose imprint that I have on my soul. I don't use that word very often. I use it here. Oh my God, we're live streaming. And language is important, and we'll come on to that as well. So that's kind of a bit of lands you where I'm at. So I've done about 15 years of unfolding my purpose. I have children, I have a wife, and all of this is really important because it's part of the ingredients we're given that we have to work stuff out. So this is some of the stuff I do in leadership stuff. So I was actually here for Zalando doing a big leadership program, working on purpose and creativity and integrity and all sorts of different things, all over the world, large companies. And one of the things I love about the word purpose is it's a great euphemism that you don't have to talk about connection, love, spirit. You can just use purpose instead. And everyone seems to be up for that conversation. But what that then leads to is what I would call purpose washing, where people think they've got a purpose, but in fact they've got an egoic mission. And that's rife both in this part of the world and in America, where purpose and mission have been conflated. And I'm going to hopefully expand a little on that as we go through this talk to try and get some clarity into what I think we're really talking about when we talk about purpose. And then myself, my wife, and I run these kind of personal development programs. I fully embodied and embraced the fact that this is what I've been called to do. But I should add, we also do a very clear understanding that we need to do this work with people who can't afford £1,000 for a 3-day workshop. So we've just in discussion with a charity in Brazil to do a program in a favela, same level of performance and production qualities, and various other places in the world. So if that's of interest to anyone here, we're very up for that conversation. So, this talk is underpinned by my life's work. I'm a practitioner, I'm very practical. Everything I do is underpinned by the fact that I have to make a living this week so that I can pay for my children's food. It's really a very clear driver to be practical in life, entrepreneurship. But I'm also in love with philosophy, in love with ideas. So over the many years I've been doing this work, really since I was about 15, I've been building something which we now call the Switch On Way. It's a methodology, and it uses 3 rivers, 3 strands of work to form one body. The first, the most obvious, is science. I'm in love with science. I love reason. I love metrics. I love measurement. But I also really understand that science can only get you so far, and you need something else. And I'm going to come and explain why that is in a minute. And the third part is this practical thing. So you've got spirituality and you've got science. That's great. But if you can't run a project to time and to budget, it's going to be really hard doing anything purposeful in the world. That simple. So, as we say, the universe will provide, but you're part of the universe, so you have to do the work to be part of that co-creation. So, this topic, purpose can save your life, business, and our world. It's a big topic. So I'm going to give you some of the things I think are important. I'm going to get some science out of the way first, because I want to answer this question in a clear affirmative from what we know. So these are some bits of research that have come out that put us into a understanding of why purpose can help avoid really the three crises that are affecting our world. The first one that you'll be familiar with is the network world, the Industrial Revolution 4.0, which is changing everything. Anyone got any blockchain involvement at the moment? Anyone got any tokens and some bitcoins and stuff? Yes, that's happening. We've got AI, VR, all this stuff. It is changing everything we know about organization, whether it's from a company point of view or whether it's from politics point of view. No one human being understands how these technologies are going to play out in the next 10 years. It's too complex, but it's so disruptive, I don't think many people appreciate how different it's going to be. The second big change which is happening, which many of you will be part of, is a really seismic shift in culture. You could call it the post-rave generation. You could call it the Burning Man generation. This sense that something's shifted in our culture and we won't accept meaningless jobs and unequal business environments and inappropriate fondling and touching, etc., 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 just as a basic standard. And then the third part of this world that we have to engage with is the global risks, which are huge. So we've got climate change, we've got terrorism, 1 million immigrants coming into Germany this year and next year. What is that going to do to this world? Depression, the number one burden on global health, stress, etc. This is all going to play out in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And my firm belief is that purpose, as a euphemism for actually quite a lot more than just one word, is probably our greatest single, easy-to-label asset to conquer these three enormous challenges. That is because in the arena of well-being, of health, these are some of the statistics that have come out. Purpose, having a high sense of meaning in life, will extend your life by 7 years on average. My favorite is it reduces the chances of Alzheimer's by 250%. And what's interesting about this study, one of the longest studies in science, is that the brains of people who have a high sense of purpose have the same amount and numbers of plaques and protein deformities that happen in dementia and Alzheimer's, but asymptomatic. Fascinating, right? Fascinating. Having a sense of meaning. Reduces mortality, reduces the chance of having a stroke, and your genes, your genomes, your actual bits of sticks of chromosomes are actually more healthy if you have a high sense of purpose than if you are happy and hedonistic in your life. It's recent research. That's about health, right? So that's a really quite important thing. Okay, let's look at happiness. I'm going to scooch through these because they're kind of not as interesting as the latter bits. Better brain processing, lower levels of disability and depression, high levels of income and wealth, if that's important to you, probably is in some ways more than you might like to think. So that's also research. In business, you've got increased engagement, increased productivity for purposeful people. The growth rate has been seen in one study, triple that of normal businesses that don't have an embedded sense of purpose at the heart of them. And more importantly for the stuff I do in organizations, having a strong sense of purpose seems to be the liquidity you need to create massive transformation to meet the digital world. Otherwise, what are you transforming around? What's the organizing principle? It's really hard. Also, purpose increases trust and decreases fear, which is exactly what you need to make change in organizations. If people are too scared of what they're going to lose, nothing will ever change. And then finally, it's very hard to find statistics about purpose and social impact. These are some of them. Millennials and mothers will switch to brands that have purpose and values and sustainability. 90%, over 90%. People would choose an employer based upon their purpose and values, et cetera, et cetera. This is all the science. These are all studies based upon measurement. So I'm going to give a little bit of philosophy coming in here. I study science. I understand science is essentially about measuring things that you can see. That's it. And you do it over and over again. You tell everyone about what you think you found, and then they try and do the same measurements. And if everyone's going, yay, it's all coming up the right numbers, then you can say, well, we can pretty much believe this is happening. But what's interesting about purpose particularly is that purpose can tell you that science can tell you that having a high sense of purpose reduces the chance of Alzheimer's. This is a huge topic, right? Huge thing at the moment from all our parents and us eventually. But science in its current state, materialist science, denies that purpose exists in the universe, denies that any meaning exists in this universe, right? So how can purpose affect anything, let alone travel from your consciousness into your brain? Interesting use of words. It can't tell us what purpose is, and it can't tell us how to find it and unlock it. So if you're rigidly attached to materialism, you can know purpose is great, but you can't touch it. This is a problem for the world, right? And it's a problem for our metaphysics. And people know what metaphysics is. Metaphysics is basically the part of philosophy that says what reality is, what our beliefs about how reality shows up, the nature of things, the nature of the universe. So I've been on a very long journey from going, okay, I'm a militant atheist. I don't believe in this new age woo-woo. Really never been anything I've been interested in. I've been actually actively put off by dolphins and lotus symbols and all these things for many, many years of my life. But then I struck this 30-year-old sort of ceiling of where materialism could take me, atheist materialism. I had money, I had gold, Amex cards, if those are important to you, air miles, hotels all over the world, clients, newspaper articles about me as the next entrepreneur, had everything. But what I didn't have is the things that materialism doesn't know how to talk about, let alone offer. So it forced me to go and find something else. So I've just spent the last almost 3 years writing a book about this, which John mentioned the name of. And the idea of the book was, okay, I can talk about all this stuff practically, I can give people tools, but what's underneath it all? What do I actually believe about the nature of the universe that is underneath what I think about the world, capitalism, politics, whatever people ask me about? So what I've been trying to do is reunite science and wisdom. So we can use that united understanding. So rather than saying the world is all consciousness, as Deepak might say, and all matter is just an illusion. This is an illusion, starving children illusion, sexually abused children are an illusion. Doesn't work for me, right? Because I'm in this world a lot of the time. But also saying just matter exists and consciousness is an illusion, which is what the sort of conventional idea in science is, including one of the great philosophers of consciousness, Daniel Dennett, who literally says that the consciousness that allows him to write his books is an illusion, it doesn't exist. It's a bit cuckoo, right? Neither of those have ever been palatable to me. So I've been on this journey to try and find out how I can be really spiritual, believe in love, put love at the heart of everything I do, put purpose at the heart of everything I do, but also not get caught up in religions, in priesthoods, in the shadows of pretty much every organizing spiritual world where eventually people give up their power to a priest, to a set of scriptures, to words, to rules. And the problem with rules are they're always out of date by the time we finish writing them because the world's changed. So the result is this idea of spiritual atheism. People go, oh, that doesn't make sense. Hopefully it makes absolute sense. And I'm going to go just a little bit into it as it pertains to purpose. The last chapter of the book is all about purpose and leadership. So, a bit of biology now. So, in the last 5 years, probably I think the most interesting thing that's come out of neurobiology is this understanding that we have two really dominant brain networks in our brain. One's called the cognitive control network, does what it says on the tin. The other, which we didn't think existed more than 5 years ago, when I was at medical school, no one had a clue, is called the default mode network. And so we used to think that if you're not focused on a task, listening, answering maths questions, your brain is off. That's not true. When you're not focusing on a task, your brain flips into this thing called the default mode network, the default setting. And scientists also call it the daydreaming network, because suddenly what happens in this state is we start to imagine. And what this is, for me, is a beautiful system. One is about delivering certainty and control in the chaos, the crazy, the fear and the worry and the stress of life. And the other is about delivering creativity. How do we solve new problems? One's really good at solving old problems. One's really good at solving new problems. So just as a muscle in your arms, you need biceps and triceps if you're going to move your arm. If you've only got one, you move it, you're never moving your arm again. So nature seems to set up antagonistic pairs to make things happen, to make movement happen. And this is the one in the brain. it's quite hard to think about these things, so I'm adding a few layers of interpretation, and I call these two different modes: control and protect mode versus create and connect mode. I teach this to CEOs of banks, and I teach this to deep spiritual seekers. Same content, same thinking. You might want to call the control and protect mode, if you're a Taoist, you might call it the human mind, and you might call create and connect mode the mind of Tao. Right? So there's lots of wisdom traditions that try and capture this bimodal way of organizing ourselves in the world. So I'm going to skip through some of this stuff. This mode is really good at controlling stuff, getting stuff done, spreadsheets, metrics, best practice. I've done this before. How do I cross the road? Well, I don't need a brainstorm to cross the road. Right? It's all programmed in, habits, fabulous. But when encountering global risks like climate change, mixed with depression, mixed with failed politics, political systems, failed business systems, we can't just keep on doing what we're doing. So we flip into this mode, which is about rule breaking, disruptive innovation, empathy, connection, etc., deep understanding of others. So as this pertains to purpose, we can call these the protector. It's like an archetypal energy within us. We all have one all the time, watching out for threat, right? Immediately your protector sees a threat, it will enact a pattern from the past to try and solve that problem. And then the connector is going, okay, whenever we're not in a stress place, I'm going to start connecting with people and finding out what their meaning is and how we can bridge it. So the protector wants you to do with your life what will keep you safe. And therefore it tries to find a mission, at best a mission. And most people find when I do purpose work with people, most people are trying to solve the problems of their own personal or ancestral wounding through their mission work. So it's still coming from a wounded self and will therefore come with loads and loads of traps and issues. And I went through this for about a decade myself. We're trying to create the good for people. Stalin thought he was creating the good for people. Hitler thought he was creating the good for people. Most people who we think are terrible and kill lots of people think they're doing something for the good, their idea of the good for you. And if these people get hurt along the way, whatevs. And we really like to see outcomes. How many people are at my workshop? How many people bought my book? Etc., etc., etc. Right? This is the world of mission. And there's this other mode, and they look really similar, and that's a real challenge for us all. Many people in this room, I feel, will be somewhere caught between these two. Because the connector wants to do what will serve others. It emanates from a healed heart to heal others. It's always interested in reducing suffering because it doesn't know exactly what the good is. But it knows what suffering is. So we want to reduce it with our hearts to other people's hearts. And it emanates from us. It's not something to get. So in other words, a summary of this is purpose doesn't care about numbers. That's mission. And it's great to have both. I'm not saying we should all be over here. I'm saying the whole point of life for me is to try and be somewhere between the two, actively and consciously, going, okay, my purpose is to stand up here and share. My mission is to share to 10 million people next year. But if I don't get that, it's all good. I'm a perfect human being because I just spoke to my child in a purposeful way. That's the thing I did today. So let's go a little bit deeper into this. This is a quote from the book. The universe wants us to be stretched to our full capacity by our purpose as we serve more and contribute more. Absolutely. More challenge, more growth, more strength. Challenge, growth, strength. But it's agnostic about whether we're on the front cover of Forbes or can retire to Florida because of our purpose. And this is super challenging because we live in a world that really likes to know if you're going to be on the front cover of Forbes. I'm talking to a retreat center, a very hip retreat center in California, called 1440, about running our switch on experience there. And what's the first thing they ask us? What's your Instagram numbers? What are your Facebook numbers? How many people can you get bums on seats? This is the core of the spiritual revolution. Right? And then you go, oh my God, I'm not enough, I haven't got enough of all these things they want me to do. So understanding the difference between mission and purpose is super important in this work, super important. I'm going to skip through some of this because I'm going to give you access to these slides later so you can take these away and study them in your own time. I work on 3 different levels: life purpose, how I show up on the bus; leadership purpose, how I show up from 8 to 8, maybe 9 to 6 if you're taking care of yourself; and then enterprise purpose if you're lucky enough to have a business that either you own or you could influence. And of course, what you want is you want alignment here. You want different expressions. So the top one will not change in your life. It will unfold and shift. It won't change its theme. The second one might change every 5 to 6 years as you become a bigger leader and a more capable leader. And this one might change as you exit. You create a new purpose for a different flavor of your purpose work in the world. So, purpose is not a goal or mission. It's not only for you. It's not technical or data-driven. It can't be. It's not about words. Don't care about the words. Words are great. If you want to define your purpose on a piece of paper and put it on your fridge, go for it. But purpose is actually about living it in the body, feeling it, going to talk to a person and realizing you spoke to them off purpose, and maybe going back and saying, sorry, I was a little bit in my control and protect mode there, ... It's how you show up, not how you speak. And the world is full of people speaking purpose, doing something very different. I see it all the time. I see it everywhere. This is what purpose washing is, right? We've just defined our purpose for our company. And then you're going to ask people, how's it feeling, this purpose? Have you made any, and the big question for me is, have you made any tough decisions yet? And if you haven't got tough decisions to make about, then you don't have purpose. You can't add purpose and not give up something. So, you don't get to choose your purpose, but you do get to choose what you do with it, and if you do something with it. So I've got to speed up because I've just seen the clock. There's a big but here. Big, big but. This mode, control and protect mode, will always override create and connect mode unless you're doing probably daily practice. It's so strong and it's so powerful, and it's designed that way. It's meant to be that way. I want you to do what's going to make you safe, what your parents think they want you to do, what society thinks you should do. When I gave up being a doctor, my grandma was devastated. I think she probably still is. When I gave up my company, my father, who's a professor of business, was like, couldn't understand it, and he still doesn't understand what I do. This is the sacrifice of purpose. Because to serve what your heart wants to do, you have to give up quite a lot of what your protector thinks is safe. And that stuff is so embedded in, so deeply, that's why it takes decades to really unfold purpose. Because you've had decades of being told what is good and right and safe. So, our personality, our patterns that we develop to be safe, protect us from actually living our purpose. And it's always there. So here's a little visual version of that. Here we are, little kids, and some bad stuff happens, so we build a wall of protective patterns. And then we grow up, and we're like, I'm big, I'm huge, but these patterns are still there. We don't even know they're there. We just do them all the time. And they stop us connecting with the world. So over years of psychospiritual transformational practice, we dissolve away these walls, and lo and behold, the bricks of the walls, our weaknesses, our shadow, our pain and suffering become the bricks of the bridge that take us out into the world. Because for me, the simplest way of talking about purpose is love in action. Not love in the armchair, or not just being in action. Love in action. It's a bridge between our strengths and the world's suffering, which is why it's so beautiful, because it brings the best out of us and delivers it. So in my summary, it's going to be a very quick summary, I talk about the purpose dividend, the things we get from purpose. So, inner directed source of meaning. No one can tell you whether you're doing a good thing anymore. You have it all inside yourself. Limitless inspiration to come to the next level after a big no, another no, another no. An anchor to ground you in a crazy world. A lens to focus all your energies and efforts. A consistent context for making meaningful choices. Freedom from the convention of other people's expectations. Fulfillments in the smallest things as much as the largest. Sound good? You want some of that? But you know when you get a dividend, you have to pay a premium. It's a bit people don't want to talk about. So here's the purpose premium, which I believe we all have to pay to really get into the purpose conversation. It's really inconvenient. You have to change the companies you buy from, how much you fly, whether you eat meat twice a week, etc., 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 etc. It often reduces our profit and our sense of vertical power. I used to have 50 staff, and people thought I was a big deal. Now no one knows who I am. And it can be painful for my protector to experience that lack of power. It's a massive investment of time and energy. It demands constant, probably daily practice. Lots of self-care versus addiction. This is a big one. It's really hard to tell people what you do. So you don't get respect for people. I'm a lawyer. Doesn't happen. And this is the big one for me. Anyone got children in the room? If you are creating mission or purpose orphans because you're out there in the world saving other people's problems, you are not living a purposeful life because you're creating suffering in the first sphere of your work. And this is tough. My son called me last night crying because I was here today. He misses me so much. Right? Purpose orphans, purpose widows. It's a big challenge. So, purpose can always be hijacked by control and protect mode, and often we don't know it's happening. That's why really understanding these two energies and what your body feels like when you're in control versus connect is key to really living a purposeful life, purposeful leader, etc., etc. So, here's some hacks. I can't go into them because I've run out of time. Get a livelihood, downsize your lifestyle choices, sacrifice a lot, keep giving up projects just to focus on one or two rather than the 30 that you want to do. Have a peer group, a community. Experiment in a quick way to find out what works for you. Be patient. Devote your work to the universe. The Bhakti Yoga, this is the big one for me. It's the biggest hack. Give up attachment to the fruits of our work, because that's mission. And just give of purpose without numbers. And surrender and surrender. And then we get to have it all. So this is a bit of metaphysics comes back in. And I'm a massive fan of Ervin Laszlo's work. I've been following it for years. So I don't believe we won't have to decide whether we're spiritual or materialistic. Yes, of course, from one mode of life, everything looks dead. Atoms, duality, separation. Reason seems really clever. Science is awesome. Entropy is the law of the world. And profit seems like the most important thing we should be doing. But in the other mode of life, we have a living system. We have interconnected non-duality. We have intuitive creativity. We have spirituality. I call it the S word because I don't like saying it very often. We have something we might call syntropy, the building of life out of chaos, and we have purpose. And what I'm here to say to you is you don't have to choose. You can have both, but you have to consciously unite them together and know which one is driving you in any moment. It's a both-and situation because there's two parts of reality and two parts of our brain, and that's why this symbol is so interesting, the Mobius strip, which if you're interested in why it's such an interesting thing, because it brings two separate things that always remain separate together in the same entity. It's a fascinating thing. So, we're about to talk about politics. I'm going to set that up with this final slide. I believe that in control and protect mode, capitalism is the most creative economic organizing system invented by humankind. We might loathe it in ways, we might still have lots of socialist stuff. My father was a communist when I was growing up. But I'm essentially working as an entrepreneur. I'm in the capitalist system whether I like it or not. So is this project. So is most of what we do. And it's great because government and charity and old forms of socialism seemed unable to solve species level problems, right? So I believe business has to do it. The problem is materialist capitalism devoid of purpose, heart, love, leads to inequality, poverty, ecological devastation, addiction, depression. So a lot of my work in companies is how do you bring these topics of top care, compassion, love, purpose, which are words you don't want to use in the boardroom very carelessly, because you'll just be pushed out by that side, into the heart of business models, into the heart of innovation. So the first thing we do is go, what problem should we solve? Let's solve a problem that matters. Matters to who? Matters to our purpose. And so we develop things like this, tools that help you do that in a structured, systematic way. So this part of the system feels safe and good, and you can then allow people's inherent desire to make the world a better place to come out. And I call this connected capitalism, which is going to be the topic of a new book. And hopefully that will be some of the building blocks to start talking in our next session. So if you want these slides, I happily give them to you. LinkedIn me, send me a message, and I'll send you a PDF of the deck. If you want to stay connected to my work and my wife's work, if you're interested in leadership, there's a group we've just kicked off called Transformational Leadership on LinkedIn, and there's one called Switch on Thrive Tribe on Facebook. I'll leave you the final quote. Once we understand our calling to serve others, any time we spend not honoring the call of purpose will bring existential agony. Nothing is as painful to us, nothing can spark such torment as knowing that we are off purpose once we experience the flow and, can't read it, of being on purpose. As has been said, hell is meeting the purpose of person you could have been. But be careful what you wish for. Thank you very much. John, you coming up to panel up?
Cheers. So I'm just going to vacate the stage here. So some of our wonderful volunteers will bring up some chairs for the panel that we're just about to do. Thank you so much, Nick. And yeah, isn't he awesome? So Nick. And I think something that your talk really points to there is that purpose is a journey. Yes. And in my experience of being involved in this work, sometimes people can get pretty antsy about like, okay, I don't know my purpose, I can't connect to that within myself, so either I must be that one person in the world who just doesn't have one, or I'm just never going to get there. And neither's true in my experience. It's a journey. So I really appreciate, yeah.
I'm going to add to that. It's a journey, and when, you know, there's a whole thing, when you look back on your life, you realize the narrative much more easily than when you're looking out when you're 18. I can now very clearly see decisions I made when I was 12 as a clear Hollywood script for a purpose, exploration, and unfolding journey. But going forwards, I had no idea why I left medical school, because actually it was in the middle of being diagnosed with depression and fibromyalgia. But was that my body going, this is not for you, this system is not for you, I'm going to give you lots of pain, mental and physiological, to get you out. And when you start to become more practiced about the embodiment of purpose, you start to see clues everywhere. Jung talks about them, Wolfgang Pauli worked with Jung to talk about them, meaningful correspondences, serendipities, which are little guidances going, this is the right workshop to be in. This is the right book to read right now. Don't know why, but I have to leave this company, etc., etc. And sometimes you don't have to know anything about purpose to follow those clues, because they seem so clear if you can just be open. And if not, I do believe the universe / through your body will make you listen.
Thank you. Thank you.